Is very near and dear to my heart because it is a topic that I've worked on in previous roles prior to NARUC, so it's nice to have colliding worlds come together. Just want to let you know that today's innovation webinar is recorded just for everyone's awareness. If you're not familiar with NARUC, we are the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, started in 1889, a nonprofit membership association for state public utility commissions, PUCs, in 50 states, DC, and 2 United States territories. Our mission is to serve in the public interest by improving the quality and effectiveness of public utility regulation. We represent a membership of approximately 250 elected and appointed state commissioners and hundreds of commission staff in energy, electricity, telecommunications, water, transportation, regulation. So that's a little bit about NARUC. You can go to the next slide. And within NARUC specifically, we have the Center for Partnerships and Innovation, and this is where I work. We are a grant-funded team dedicated to providing technical assistance to our members. We identify emerging challenges and connect state commissions with the expertise and strategies to inform their decision-making. We strive to build relationships and develop resources, and we constantly are delivering trainings. We have a CPI fact sheet with our recent publications and upcoming events on under our quick link section on our website. So please feel free to visit and learn a bit more about CPI and our current activities and our recent publications. Today's innovation webinar topic is titled Green Banks, Financing a Reliable Future. And I have the awesome duty into introducing our moderator, and is Chair Rory Christian from the New York State Public Service Commission. I will read Chair Christian's bio, and he will be introducing our speakers. So Chair Christian, on September 30th, 2021, Governor Kathy Hochul designated Commissioner Rory M. Christian as the Chair and Chief Executive Officer of the Public Service Commission. On June 10, 2021, Chair Christian was appointed to Commissioner, and his term runs through February 1st, 2027. Chair Christian began his career in the energy industry with Keyspan Energy, where he first served as a civil engineer before transitioning to a role engaging government agencies operating in Long Island and New York City. Chair Christian then served as the Director of Energy Finance and Sustainability for the New York City Housing Authority, where he oversaw the authority's then $500 million plus utility portfolio with the aim of reducing annual energy expenditures while achieving city, state, and federally mandated greenhouse gas emission reduction requirements. More recently, he was the director of the New York Clean Energy at the Environmental Defense Fund, where he provided strategy management, programming, business development, and stakeholder collaboration for the Clean Energy Program in New York State. He currently teaches energy efficiency courses at the Columbia University School of Professional Studies. He also volunteers his time with workforce development organizations and is a long-term supporter of the former chair of the WE Act for Environmental Justice's Board of Directors. Thank you, Chair Christian, for moderating today's innovation webinar, and I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Hylia, and I appreciate the introduction and the opportunity to be here today. So as Hylia mentioned, Rory Christian, Chair and CEO of the Public Service Commission of New York. And I'm happy to be here today with 2 amazing speakers on the topic of green banks, a topic that I think if you're here, you find very interesting. And by the end of this discussion, you're going to find incredibly interesting. So I'll start with introducing our first speaker, Matt Masunis, who is the founder of Blue Horizon Consulting, LLC, advising clean tech startups throughout the country. Matt was a longtime policy specialist with the Connecticut Green Bank, so he has some deep knowledge of how that works. The Connecticut Green Bank is a quasi-state agency accelerating the green energy adoption by making financing accessible and affordable. He was also liaison to the legislative and regulatory bodies and led the development of zero emissions transportation strategies. So his experience includes everything from legal, regulatory, and coalition engagement, public relations, brand management, carbon offset creation, political and grassroots campaigns. And I'm confident I can add to that list, but I'm going to cut it short right there. Matt holds a certificate in financing and deploying clean energy from Yale University, and a master's degree in public administration with a concentration in public finance from the University of Connecticut. Matt, so everybody knows who you are, why don't you wave your hand and say hello real quick? Thank you very much. All right, now we're going to go to Jordan Taylor, who is the Associate Director of Renewable Energy of the Montgomery County Green Bank. He has a professional background in residential and commercial solar development, with a particular interest in maximizing the adoption and consumption of energy from clean energy sources, as well as improving the infrastructure in general. Jordan has a wealth of experience in contract management and customer relations, and a deep technical knowledge of solar project design, installation, and maintenance. And I believe prior to joining the Montgomery County Green Bank, Jordan led a real estate development company with a focus on building sustainable net zero housing communities supporting disinvested areas. Jordan, why don't you wave your hand so people know who you are? Thank you very much. So with that, we're going to start off with Matt Masunas. Matt, you have a presentation you're going to give the audience today. Why don't you kick things off and go from there?
Thank you, Chair Christian. You can hear me all right?
Loud and clear on my end.
And like the chair said, I'm Matt Masunas. So there's a number of green banks out there, which means there's a number of green bankers. Why is an independent consultant talking to you on this webinar about green banks? Well, I worked at the nation's first green bank. And like Chair Christian mentioned, legislative, regulatory, marketing, pilots, program design. Slide, please. So allow me to start with myself. In 6th grade, I measured all the household appliances electricity consumption in my parents' house for a science fair. I used to browbeat them all the time too about using styrofoam. So part of me has always wanted to synchronize humanity with the environment. And one good place to start for that is the energy sector. Eventually, of course, this goes to being an early adopter of clean tech from the moment I got a house of my own, like efficiency audit, insulation, solar PV, electric vehicle. But before I tell you where else this goes, let's take a moment to stop and think, what if my parents' household, circa 1993, had access to affordable financing for clean energy, and even maybe an entity that could aggregate many disparate projects and make markets more affordable? What if they could eventually finance an EV charger for the EV1 once that would come out? That's all conjecture, so slide please. Let's move on to 2006. I'm a staffer at the state legislature. I start working for the House chair of the Energy and Technology Committee. Totally catch the energy policy bug. 5 years later, I distinctly remember reading this article that's below right here. And that's because, well, it was the day after my 30th birthday, and I remember that for very different reasons. I'm reading about this new green bank. It's the first in the nation, and I keep on thinking about it. I wanted to go to the state's new energy department and ask for an internship with the commissioner's office. And at that, invented on a bluff, saying it was for school, because I wanted to see how the law of the land got implemented here, the purpose of scaling clean energy deployment. And maybe that's another reason I'm with you here today. I got to see action with green banks before the first one even had staff on it. I was a staffer just up the street at the state legislature. I ran out of vacation time. That becomes the end of my internship, and I go back to my normal job. But at the time, this was really transformational law, overhauling Connecticut energy policy and creating the first green bank. Slide, please. So then, 2015, a position opens at the intersection of policy, legal, and marketing. And not to brag, but I crushed the interview. So now you've heard a few stories about my experience coming up with the green banks. Next, let me describe a few key characteristics about them. Slide, please. So let's start quickly, well, with what a green bank isn't. It's not a retail depository institution. I have Pam from the office up here because I always felt a little bit bad for our administrative coordinator. I was proximate to her, and I keep on hearing these inbound phone calls from well-meaning people, asking, can I bring my $50 to you and open a savings account? The term bank is slang. It was originally called the Clean Energy Finance and Investment Authority, and then it was renamed. Slide, please. So what they do is a little bit more like development finance. Slide again, at least, yeah, there you go, where an ability is needed to mediate market development and push it in innovative directions, like especially with commercial project financing, like de-risking the lending to private investors into clean energy projects, teaching those private lenders how to fish and to get used to clean energy lending, helping assemble capital stacks to help make projects economic, warehousing loans for the market after originating demand for them, and standardizing processes to help pressure down the soft cost of deployment. Slide, please. So overall, this class of organization is about combating climate change, innovation, and disruptive significance. Slide, please. So let's take an interlude and tour a few programs for a moment. No, these aren't embedded videos, even though it looks like them, so you don't need to click. The first program that was created after Connecticut formed a green bank was in 2012. Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy was a legislated program that the Green Bank then became the statewide administrator of. So this is Bishop John Thompson and co-pastor Janice from Calvary Temple Christian Center. Their flock stopped shivering after they converted to new high-efficiency heating equipment courtesy of commercial PACE financing, rather than pay over $50,000 out of pocket. They entered a no upfront cost financing that's tied to the property. Their prayers for heating equipment uptime were answered, along with $15,000 in savings annually, and that heating system is going to work when the house of God's packed. So, like I said, the Green Bank is the statewide administrator for CPACE, but there's also now a robust market for private project origination and finance. And so if it's not a deal coming in that belongs to the Green Bank, then the Green Bank's still there working as a kind of program intermediary. Slide. There are plenty of touch points, however, where a Green Bank interacts not just with contractors and financiers, but also with the public at large. The most recent is selling the equivalent of war bonds to people who want a better interest rate than a CD and want to do some good. Generally speaking, the way this works, a reserve is cut out from larger deals with institutional investors, allowing for smaller denomination citizen purchases. Various maturities, and for the notes, that's actually as small as $100 with help from the crowdfunding platform Raise Green. And I got one, so you could join me. This is a way to democratize access to clean energy investment and build a constituency of stakeholders. The bonds are underwritten by different things depending on the campaign. So one example would be renewable energy credit production from a fleet of homeowner solar PV systems. Another one might be the loan payback flows from utility energy efficiency loans, if a particular partnership's in place there. So anyway, that's an exciting new development that's gotten some national recognition in recent years. Slide. And now a more traditional use case. This is Bill and Lisa. They enhance their home's performance with solar PV and a ductless heat pump. They'll be saving $3,000 annually thanks to the Connecticut Green Bank's residential lending product, Smart E. So here, the Green Bank sets terms on a programmatic box, like not to exceed interest rates, and local lenders like credit unions will provide in their capital. So it allows for favorable rates, considering it can be a larger loan that's not secured by any property. And that can be kind of complementary to utility energy efficiency loans, where they might have better rates, like buying interest down to zero, because Smart E is extensible beyond the loan limits of the utilities loan, and it has certain other alternative terms, like no money down. So it's sometimes complementary for a homeowner to stack those loans when they're getting multiple improvements at the same time, especially. Slide. So enough about programs for now. Let's zoom out and let's talk about some of the most recent developments. There's now a national green bank. Let me repeat that. There's now a national green bank. The Inflation Reduction Act created a greenhouse gas reduction fund inside the EPA. That can act as a sort of conduit lender to state and local green banks, providing treasury rate capital from the federal financing bank. So that actually brings full story the circle of Connecticut's green bank, which was established after the failure to enact a national one in 2009 or around there. All the political capital at the time got tied up on healthcare reform. The original, thank you, Joe Manchin, for this one. And the idea then went out to the laboratory of the states, first Connecticut, fast followed by New York. So this is a big, big reason to stay tuned to this space. It is now very well capitalized. A slide. So core question here, what's in it for NARUC? What's in it for you guys? There's billions of federal dollars newly available for the grid. So why spend time thinking about green banks? Well, to my mind, you've got certain costs in those bill components that you approve, like costs for state policies, like clean energy deployment, carrying costs for utility loans, a need to balance utility practices against enshrined public priorities, like hitting clean energy targets. So what if I told you that there are ways for green banks to create efficiencies in some of those areas? Slide. So let's talk about it. Why don't we talk about the intersection of utilities and green banks? So here's a few observations, and they're going to go in multiple directions, actually. So slide. There's a popular utility efficiency program, Small Business Energy Advantage. It gives properties grants for improvements and can also finance the remainder. The green banks had a successful agreement with the distribution companies to source private capital for them for those efficiency improvements, mission-based amalgamated bank on this deal. Traditionally, a distribution company might, to my understanding here, front loans to customers first and then charge ratepayers the interest rate costs for the carrying costs on it. This alternative arrangement results in ratepayer savings by providing capital in for efficiency projects through utilities to the projects at lower lending rates to the utility, and therefore there's less money that needs recovering from ratepayers because of that lower cost of capital. Slide, please. Let's talk about co-administering a program. So the legislature prioritized a storage deployment target. It indicated it's up to the PUC who the administrator was, and the PUC then elicited a request for program designs, combined a few submissions together, and made the green bank and the distribution companies run the program together for storage in Connecticut, up to a 500 megawatt deployment target on that side of the policy. So the parties task split with, to my memory, the green bank leading on marketing and on the upfront declining block incentive, and the utilities on the dispatch protocols for the batteries and on the performance-based incentive over time. So let me answer one question up front. Are green banks subject to benefit cost tests? I know you'll love them. Only if the program is directly under regulatory purview is pretty much the answer there, like in this case. Otherwise, it's a decision on merits that regardless is defensible as good policy for ratepayers. Otherwise, they wouldn't move it forward. Let me give you a great example, to my mind, of how the nuances of regulatory policy and utility practice might actually intersect a little bit badly with a green bank that's trying to, it sees its role as pushing innovation and catalyzation of the market. So as this program was starting, the green bank was positioned for remarketing a complementary technology, right? Like after administering a solar PV incentive to 40,000 households, coming back to provide them with battery incentives and financing. And obviously they'd be the best customer pool to start with. It harmonized the intermittent production to discharge during peak demand hours, you know, all that stuff. But the utilities had a practice, and I'm sure a good reason for it, about not letting behind the meter storage discharge onto their system. So we know batteries are cool, they're kind of weird and complicated to regulate, but this is an interesting example of a friction point with green bank innovation meeting regulated utilities adherence to practices, like what are you letting onto our grid? This program, Energy Storage Solutions, is currently wrapping up its first year, and to my mind, again, that disjunction I was talking about could be a reason why the bucket for commercial and municipal projects is ending this year oversubscribed, while residential projects with the original idea of remarketing to all the solar customers is ending the year undersubscribed. It's those rules on battery export. So interesting collision of worlds when it comes to that. Next slide. You knew we'd get into econometrics and fancy charts somewhere. So here comes some technical stuff. I'll not get too far into it, and you could just save it for later if you're interested. there was a legislative policy to give the Green Bank a form of cost recovery on its solar PV incentive program, not as a regulated entity, but just as its own form of cost recovery, because by 2015 and 16, the cash burn for incentives was getting really intense with what the solar market started doing. Actually, slide please. And there was also a shortfall in RECs for suppliers to meet the renewable portfolio standard. So simply put, under this law, distributed residential solar became a Class 1 resource. The utilities enter into 15-year master purchase agreements with the Green Bank for tranches of RECs produced by residential solar. And the utilities could then retire them to satisfy RPS compliance obligations or resell to the spot market and refund any economic surplus to the ratepayers if that's a better deal at the time. So yeah, here I'll be mercifully brief with this sort of thing, but if you want to dig in some more, let me know. Slide. So here's an example of a community campaign, actually, between a green bank and distribution companies. It was proscribed in basic terms legislatively and then approved by the PUC. It involved having the utility identify a distribution circuit feeder whose infrastructure would soon become overburdened and due for an upgrade to see if saturating that feeder with DERs could avert that need for upgrade. So this is an example of a great effort and a great idea, but another place for disjunction, and this time in its selection criteria. Although it was the right spot for the utility, expensive hardware on the feeder circuit, it's reaching its capacity limits, yeah, we should do that spot. There had actually been multiple rounds, it turns out, of solar PV adoptions in that area. And so uptake was really limited on the campaign because it was already saturated from a marketing perspective, even with the availability of this additional tariff-based incentive that was developed for the campaign. So trial and error / learning, right? It's a natural byproduct of a green bank type entity being on that innovative vanguard, right? Next slide. So this was the kind of brand promise of Connecticut Green Bank. Kind of wrapping it all up here and giving you my top line takeaways for what is a green bank: creating innovative financing structures, creative approaches for marketing and market development, working that demand generation side to gin up activity, attacking process friction points like soft costs, being a thought leader in the space, and moving the ball forward on a specific public mission for climate finance. And just maybe, the next kid is doing a science fair project. He could start off in a better world that's powered by the renewable energy of community. And I only hope I lived up to the promise of the kid you did see back when we first started here. So that's me, last slide, and I'm here all hour. So thanks so much if you have any questions.
Thank you, Matt. I know you would have appreciated a kilowatt as a Christmas gift, given what you just went through. So thanks for that presentation and the background. So now we're going to go on to Jordan Taylor. Sorry, oh, there it is. All right. Jordan, we're on to you.
All right. Well, thanks, Rory. Thanks, Matt. That was an awesome presentation. Great information. And, I'm definitely super excited to dig in. And so basically what I'll be doing is I'll be level setting, just coming from the perspective of the Green Bank so that we can get, a good idea on the ground, boots on the ground type of perspective on, what Green Banks do, and specifically with Montgomery County in reference to a lot of the elements that Matt was speaking about, just in being able to solve issues, create those innovative products, to be able to get ultimate adoption. So let's go to the first slide. So Green Banks in general, we are a nonprofit entity. Specifically, the Montgomery County Green Bank has been chartered by the county specifically, and the ultimate goal is to accelerate the investment in energy efficiency and renewable energy by combining their funds with the funds from the private sector. And ultimately, the goal is to de-risk projects and attract private capital to be investing in these areas, into these markets. The focus is been to be building more diversity, more equitable and inclusive communities. And so our objective is really to, and I think it aligns very well with the renewable energy industry generally, by creating this diverse approach to creating happier, healthier human beings who are stewards of the environment and stewards of the planet. Next slide. The Montgomery County's ultimate goal is to reach net zero by 2035, and that is an alignment of a part of that mission. The capital that we've received has been from the Pepsilon Exelon merger, and next slide is a little bit duplicative. But we've been able to date deploy a majority of that capital into some of the projects throughout Montgomery County. Next slide. And so we've basically been able to use these funds to create a more attractive underwriting for these projects by doing things like buying down interest rates, investigating projects that may not be evaluated by traditional financing institutions. If it is not, a square peg in a square hole, a lot more times than not, your traditional financing companies who are in the market are not receptive to financing these projects. So that's one of the key areas that green banks have been useful and good for in sourcing out these very unique projects or these cutting edge projects. Matt referenced it before, projects like battery technology and EV charger adoptions, where they may not be financially, financially viable. The Green Bank is able to come in with lower cost of capital, lower financing costs to be able to allow those projects to make it to construction. Next slide. And so there are a number of different products that the green banks offer. And for both of the commercial and residential sector, we have a multitude of financing options. So with the residential sector, which, I'm sure many of you have seen, traditional solar systems, energy efficiency upgrades, and also items like these EV chargers. And we've just recently started to finance a larger number of battery installations that pair with solar systems. Also within the commercial sector, we are financing commercial properties to accommodate their building energy performance goals, which in Montgomery County has been enacted and will be taking effect within the next 2 years. And we are doing, we have an additional number of options there for financing, Clear, CPACE, which Matt spoke about before, community solar, building energy efficiency and building performance. And we also have custom financing solutions if they don't fit into a traditional financing model. And again, that speaks to the strength of green banks in being able to solve those difficult projects and create innovative solutions to be able to increase that adoption for the private markets. Next slide. And so far to date, the Montgomery County Green Bank, we have 6,396 metric tons in annual greenhouse gas reductions, 16.9 million in closed energy project values. We have done a large number of low and moderate housing benefit, and that number has been increasing as we have been adding more projects just even this year onto the portfolio. Next slide. And so a lot of times within solar, there is a very steep education curve. And no matter whether you've been in the industry or you've been adjacent to the industry, a lot of times it is very helpful to go through to understand a bit better on how we are going about financing these projects. Let's go to the next slide. So traditional third-party rental options for commercial PPAs, the contract is signed between the developer and the either the homeowner or the commercial entity. The green bank is only assisting in making connections between those two groups, and also providing a secondary eyes on the projects and the proposals. Those proposals are presented to the consumer after the developer goes on site and checks the site. And after that proposal is accepted, they go into this agreement, and the green bank does all of the background documentation and processing, and also holds those projects onto their books. And the maintenance and operations are also taken care of by the developer. So holistically, the developer is the end-all be-all for each of the end consumers, and the green bank is coming in and providing that financing option, and also a secondary reliable third-party source of which more times than not allows the homeowners and the commercial entities to be more confident in the projects that they are that are being presented to them. Next slide. And so with the third-party financing options, I'm sure a lot of us have seen, you know, the solar installers come and knocking on doors, you know, giving out free solar. Again, what we are doing is akin to being able to help allow homeowners to have that faith in taking those next steps. It is not only just being able to provide the financial options for them, so that they don't necessarily feel like they're getting fleeced by, you know, some solar developer or solar salesperson coming and knocking on their door. We're providing them with consultations and background information on what things they should be looking for in regards to installing solar and renewable technology. Next slide. And so with the process, that is one of the, I guess, the most beneficial aspects, just coming from the solar space generally. More times than not, you have a lot of solar sales representatives who don't necessarily have the time or attention. Obviously, they're commission driven to give the quality understanding and background of what it takes to convert your home to energy efficient, renewable energy properties. And so by being able to provide the value and walk customers through and handhold them throughout that process is a very vital responsibility that many green banks hold. And working through those processes allows them to be confident every step of the way on that they are getting a quality installation. Go to the next step. Next slide. And this is the last slide, but, you know, just going through each of these projects, being able to have the backing from the municipalities and working with the individuals on a one-on-one basis to work through all of the individual elements. Again, that's secondary or backstop in going through any of these renewable energy projects allows for us to be able to add stability to the market and not have so many of the issues that come along with developers and you know, bad actors within the solar industry who are, you know, may have a propensity to take advantage of certain customers. And so that's the final slide. A lot of this Matt had already covered, but I do think that it was it's good to kind of recap just a more practical, more simplified look at the role that green banks are playing within the market on a day-to-day and a transactional basis. And I'm going to turn it back over to Rory for the Q&A.
All right, thank you, Jordan. That was great. So yeah, I mean, as you were going through your presentation, I saw a number of things that you know, really reinforce the value of the green bank, not just the financing itself, but also the kind of guide path to get from start to finish that you guys can also include as part of that. I think that's critically important and, you know, very essential given, you know, the relative newness of this to many people out there. Providing that backstop for both developers and for customers is going to be really, really important. So really appreciated you highlighting that. Now, you know, open up the question to audience, but I'm going to start off with one of my own. So, you know, though Connecticut was the first state green bank in the US, New York City's Energy Efficiency Corporation was the first local green bank. We can argue about the timing later. But it got its start with ARA funding, and many consider its efforts to be the catalyst behind the eventual formation of New York State Green Bank. And, you know, just based on the slide you showed earlier, Matt, it's easy to make the comparisons between what happened with ARA funding then and in Connecticut State. I think Connecticut started with ARA funding as well, but correct me if I'm wrong. And particularly with what the federal funds are quickly becoming available now. You know, I'm curious, and this is for both of you, and we'll start with you first, Matt. I'm curious how you see this new funding playing a role in either spurring the creation of new green banks or amplifying the effectiveness of existing ones, if that's something you could talk to a bit.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair. I'll cede ground when it comes to NYC being the first local right there. I've heard the same thing. We did use ARA funding, and surprisingly, you know, there's a long runway in front of some of these federal funding pots. Like, it was used for at least a decade, mostly for residential lending for interest rate buy downs. The main source of seed capital for the Green Bank actually comes, I didn't mention this, from a ratepayer surcharge and within the system benefit fund, 1 penny per kilowatt hour. So a fraction of the overall allocation for well-intended and well-executing sorts of conservation projects like energy efficiency, but, you know, the little cent that could when it comes to the green banks. So for going forward with $27 billion available through a national climate bank, which I think was what you're talking about, yeah, I think that should spur creation of either new green banks. They should be thinking about this because the capital's available there. They've gone through, to my knowledge, rounds of public input, and there might have just been one of those that closed a week or two ago. So there are hundreds of different organizations commenting on how should you work this? How should we form this? What is this? So maybe it's not even fully articulated yet. If some of that can be used for, let's say, seed funding for newly created green banks, but what I think they and existing green banks can be confident about is that they can have now a much lower cost access to capital rather than, you know, borrowing medium, relending medium, or relending high for interest rates. You've got virtually 0% with federal treasury rates that they could source capital from and then relend. So it makes the entire economic use case for a green bank's role in the market that much more viable. So, yeah.
Great, thanks, Matt. Jordan?
Yeah, I agreed 100%. I definitely think that with the surplus of funds that are available, even with the funds that we've been able to work with initially, we've been able to deploy a large number of projects and to be able to get engagement from private investors, both single and equity funds, investing in projects throughout the counties. And with increased funds, we are able to take on and reduce risk in a larger number of projects that are impactful, especially at the local levels that we're looking at. And just like what Matt was speaking to, one of the things that, you know, we find is that because the sheer number of residential consumers and customers, they may necessarily get left out, you know, from the financing, rounds of financing, because larger companies, larger banks are mostly looking at, these larger projects and utility scale projects, whereas, we at the Green Bank are looking to finance these smaller projects, single families. And Matt, we would have loved to get you guys your EV chargers and your batteries at the house. So I definitely think that by being able to have access to these fundings, to have that target for the end consumer and those people that we're really doing this for, the individuals, being able to make those impacts in the community, I think is one of the things that I would love to see. And I definitely am going to be driving here at Montgomery County Green Bank and being able to have that impact at the local level.
Oh, that's great. That's good to hear. And, as just thinking about what you two just shared, something comes to mind. I'm thinking about, the lower cost of capital that's going to be coming and the opportunity to do even more work. And I'm thinking about one of my first times working with a Green Bank. It was to finance an affordable housing project. And these projects, as I'm sure you all know, their cash flow is often very limited. Not enough money, liquid capital available to even initiate the project, let alone potentially maintain it. And the need is often far more significant than a traditional multifamily market rate building. And the payback, as a result, isn't always as attractive as other projects. So they have trouble finding financing. And I've seen a number of these projects using what I'm going to call traditional technologies, rooftop solar, high efficiency boilers, not heat pumps quite yet, but soon. But I understand green banks have played a role in advancing new technologies, and if not new technologies outright, unique applications of existing ones. And I'm curious if you could speak to some examples of either new technologies or new applications that you guys have financed that because of the existence of a green bank would not have received financing one way or another, and anything unique about the financing itself that went into making that happen. And Jordan, I'm going to punt it over to you first.
Yeah, and so from what I've seen, as far as the existence of the Montgomery County Green Bank, they have been doing projects like geothermal and battery storage for some time now, which is, from my just background in solar development as a whole, battery technology, even up until this past year, 2-3 years, has not been a prevalent technology. So really by assisting in the adoption of, installation of these newer technologies, it has allowed for the market to then start leaning into these areas where they were not going to investigate before, providing, sales to manufacturers and installers who are installing these technologies now know that they have a sustainable customer base that they can be looking for because they know that they can actually have some affordable financing options. And even for some of the even newer technologies, like some of the high efficiency and bifacial panels, those were some of the first projects that were installed within Montgomery County, financed by the Green Bank. And so by being able to get these lower cost financing, when you look at the adoption curves, those adoption curves on the front end, you're looking at much higher cost of materials and labor. There are many things that developers and installers have to work through, and those are additional costs that they're going to bake into their projects. And so by being able to get these lower capital costs, that is how we start getting the adoption for these newer technologies so that we can lower the overall cost of manufacturing to get a more widespread adoption, because we then see the benefit from those technologies, and we only get that from having that real-time data in the field.
Powerful. Yeah.
Should I take it?
Go for it, Matt. Yeah.
So one thing that you mentioned, just starting with affordable housing, the Green Bank did run 1 or 2 rounds in Connecticut of aggregating together a number of those low margin sorts of projects that are difficult to pencil, RFPing out competitively for the developer on them, and then putting solar all across maybe a dozen plus affordable housing units in Connecticut all at once. So you made me think of that. For unique applications of existing or new technologies, I could think a lot about that, so I'm just going to, try to contain it here. I can give a few examples. For instance, what comes to mind is an Archimedes screw turbine. We ran a project, a micro hydro project that was the first of its kind in North America, using a giant, almost drill auger that's used in Europe, except tilted and then run in reverse. So you could run water down it, and it almost acts like a fish ladder at the same time, like it doesn't hurt the fish. And so it meets environmental standards rather easily too. So we did kind of a groundbreaking project when it comes to that technology. Connecticut's a fuel cell state. We've got an industry cluster there. We're one of the states that has it in its RPS as like a class 1 resource. So, we do a ton when it comes to fuel cells and applications for that at different scales. And then, there's a lot in the enabling statute for Connecticut Green Bank that doesn't necessarily get touched because of just commercial viability of some of the technologies. For instance, they can finance tidal power, except that all they border is Long Island Sound, right? And so you're not going to put generators under the waves. They're not going to be big enough. So, there's enablement when it comes to the governing statutes of, some of these technologies. It just depends on their commercial viability, and are developers and property owners ready to adopt them and or at scale sufficient to get the attention of financiers on it. One thing I didn't mention earlier, Connecticut's Green Bank has kind of expanded in the last few years from being energy only to more of a climate bank, where they're actually allowed to tackle additional climate change mitigation wedges should they get into them. Like, for instance, low carbon agricultural practices, forestry, carbon offsets, open space, that sort of thing. Getting into additional areas where one can do removals or eliminations of CO2 loading from the atmosphere that's not energy related. The trick right there is bifurcating your funding, right? Because if you're energy mostly or energy only, where you're getting the money from. It's electric sector, maybe gas sector. In that case, you're pretty much reliant on going philanthropic, federal grants, consortiums of NGOs, that sort of thing, like mission-based organizations, to cobble together these new areas that my understanding is they're only now just starting to explore.
Yeah. And I mean, to that point, that is one of the benefits of having, these excess funds, is now being able to start sourcing and tapping into where we wouldn't traditionally have buckets of financing for some of these, agrivoltaic systems, and for some of these systems that are climate mitigation, sequestration, and type of sources, and especially on the energy efficiency side, because they tend to work in tandem. There are a number of new technologies that are coming out, especially when we're not only considering the actual installation components, but also the technologies. There are a large number of different sensors and softwares that integrate with building management systems, and the microgrid technologies as well, to assist with not only a reduction of emissions from buildings, but also for the efficient use and management of the electricity, which also, permits flexibility of the grid. And so now we have a double or triple bottom line for the output of being able to invest some of these funds into different areas, or areas that have generally not been explored.
Right. So I got a little note saying we're running low on time. So I've only got about maybe 2 questions left for you. So I'm going to be quick on one of them. So compound question, but the gist of it is, you guys are banks. You're not giving money away. You expect a rate of return. What kind of return do you guys normally receive? Is that something you can talk about?
You want me to pioneer that one? So there's an element of political risk, budgetary risk, when it comes to green banks, if they're creatures of government. On average, every 3 years up in Connecticut, I think, they would come in and say, what's yours is ours, because we need it for the general fund. And so the promise of a green bank earning enough interest income over time to capitalize its own operations so that there's no overhead and money in equals money out for deployment, it can get set back by politics at times, and that could come in. So as a result of that, it was around 2017, 2018, Connecticut had its board of directors establish sort of a hurdle rate of return on its loans. Like it would expect to be able to make, I think, about 5% over 10 years in order to meet that. So as much as they want to focus on innovating and the cutting edge and deployment, there has to be that aspect where the financing isn't so concessionary that you're just kicking the money out the door. It becomes a grant.
Right. And Jordan, you too?
Correct. And that was like Matt was speaking about. We use that as a control. There are certain things that are very far on the edge of that blade that, you know, there may be some things that will not pencil. We can't buy down enough points to make some of these projects pencil. But, you know, we are still providing resources to these individuals, whether it be sources of other grants and capital, R&D information that they would be able to utilize to get that project up off the ground and started. And then once it does, you know, is able to get into that range where we can start penciling on these projects, then, you know, we're right in there at the front of the spear.
Gotcha. So just to be clear, if I came to you guys looking for a grant, I'm knocking on the wrong door?
Yeah, we can help you find some, and we do actually, you know, we are rolling out some new projects like a technical assistance program as well, that actually does subsidize the cost of energy efficiency assessments and solar assessments to get that initial momentum going for starting and engaging on any of these projects.
Got it. Okay. All right. So my final question, and you know, thinking about the role, the bank aspect of what you guys do. You mentioned de-risking, warehousing. You know, one of the tools I've seen a green bank use is taking a first loss position in financing, where, you know, they if you need to borrow $100,000, the green bank will say, okay, well, you know what, we're going to take a first loss position of $30,000 on that loan. Meaning, if you're going to lose 30 grand on it, we'll take the preliminary hit. You only lose 70 grand. And that lowers the overall risk and exposure, de-risking the potential financing. You know, in doing this, this is one of the many tools green banks use, and it's, you know, opened up different areas of financing. I think Matt, you'd mentioned, you know, allowing financiers to finance projects they would not normally have ever done, attracting more private capital and whatnot. And so, just thinking about the different tools available, you know, I'd love to understand from your perspective which has been the most effective in truly driving the private sector to engage. To both of y'all, whoever wants to answer first.
You want to take that one, Jordan?
So with you know, those loan loss reserves and you know, taking those first position on losses definitely helps the comfortability of many owners and many developers in allowing these projects to pencil and underwrite. And so just like we were speaking about before, up to a certain point that we are taking those first positions, and by providing quality underwriting and looking at good quality projects, we have good faith that they are still going to be able to perform on these projects, but has allowed for more players to come into the market by knowing that we are essentially that backstop. There has been a significant adoption and uptake, knowing that they have essentially a partner in this project, and they are not taking on all the risk. That's really the name of the game in commercial finance, is elimination of risk. Well, we can't do that, but we can help to take a good portion of that off the table by taking first position on those. So I think that that's something that's definitely been well received by the industry, and they have been looking for any and every opportunity to take advantage of it.
Yeah, and that's a rational position for a green bank to take, because energy loans are traditionally pretty safe. Like, there's not a whole ton of defaults on those, including and especially on the residential side. It's actually very low risk. You know, Connecticut had issued an open RFP for capital projects ideas, essentially how New York Green Bank has always run, which is, hey, developers, you tell us. We're not going to write a programmatic box. Like, what do you actually need? to make this project work. So, you know, whether it's like a slice of mezzanine debt and then we hold the strings together on a syndicate of other lenders, you know, that sort of traditional approach or not, that sort of you know, credit profile can be explored and what that would be underwritten to, which isn't that dissimilar from a normal bank. Let me invert the question for a moment right there, because there's ways to pool and de-risk populations too, when it comes to clean energy customers. For example, those with lower credit profiles, or those from disadvantaged communities, or who don't have a whole backlog of, you know, history of on-time payments, you know, but for utility payments. And so that could be relied on in order to induce more activity for energy savings agreements, say, in those populations, so as to give to the populations that could use it the most, those affordable bill savings. And then I did see a, if you don't mind, Chair, I saw an audience question. Are there additional subsidies available for low to moderate income? The answer is yes. I could just keep it easy right there. You know, when it comes to both solar, battery, the kicker incentives are very generous when it comes to the LMI populations. Yeah, the equity component is very much in the lens in Connecticut, and I'm sure elsewhere.
And you're right 100% about the ability of the green banks to use, you know, a lot of the latitude of innovating and finding more creative ways to make more projects be able to pencil better, or to be able to de-risk it in a way in which we can actually get to those target audiences. So yeah, that's great.
All right, great. Well, thank you both for a great discussion, good presentations. Halia, kick it back to you.
Thank you, everyone. Awesome. And I thank you again for your participation, and Chair, thank you for moderating today's webinar series. It was awesome. I'm actually going to pass it over to Jessica. We have one last slide, just some more upcoming innovation webinar events and just additional last comments. So to you, Jessica.
Thank you, Halia, and thank you to everyone who was able to join us today for this innovation webinar. And one final big thank you to our speakers today for your wonderful expertise on this topic. It was very interesting. And as we close out the 2022 year, we do have a couple innovation webinars scheduled for 2023. So our next one will be in January on grid architecture. And then we have one in March on resource adequacy. So we hope that you all are able to join us for innovation webinars in 2023 as well. And just one final thanks to the Department of Energy for its support in this innovation webinar series. All the resources will be posted on our website at the innovation webinar link there, coming up probably early next week from this webinar. So thank you so much, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.